Well, ladies and gentlemen, you might have heard his voice on School Sports Live before, and you might not know his face so well, but this is Justin Middleton, the commentator of School Sports Live. And it's such an honor and privilege to talk to him today on Rugby Chats with Angus. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Angus, my pleasure. I can't wait.
Most kids grow up with a dream of playing a certain sport and being a star at it. I don't think many think, geez, I want to be a rugby commentator one day. What made you realize that dream in your life?
I think firstly, I was just kind of lucky that I had a family who was very interested in sports, and sports was always on, was kind of the soundtrack of the house, if I can use those terms. And from a young age, my father would take me to Newlands, and there would always be rugby on. Actually, interestingly enough, my father's sporting passion is more football, but he showed me enough of rugby, and I would watch a lot of games, go to Newlands, but from my early days, there were probably about three voices who I would continuously listen to, and that was obviously through Super Rugby, Currie Cup, Tri Nations. So obviously South Africa, it would be probably you, Bladen, who's had a massive influence on my passion. And then Grant Nisbet from New Zealand. I mean, he's been commentating now for, I think, close to 40 years. He's done 300 tests. And then on an Australian side would be Gordon Bray. So, all these voices going on in the background. And I actually remember in about grade 4, grade 5, and this is going to sound actually ridiculous, but I remember you, Bladen, after doing a game, he had a highlights show of the previous weekend, but he wasn't commentating. He obviously commentated on the games, but he did like a narration of what happened on the weekend. And I actually copied his narration and presented the same video to the class. And I copied exactly what he said. So just to, it's not so simple, like, why do I have this passion? But I think I was just almost obsessed with the voices, that I heard at that age. And another example of this would be just, some amazing tries that were scored and the voices behind the tries, because I would later go back and, maybe put the tape in and, go through the try again and actually try imitate these commentators. So, for example, when Richard Bams ran over Carlos Spencer and scored that 40, 50-meter try, my brother and myself would actually imitate Grant Nisbet, or Mario Chiver's hat-trick against New Zealand in 2004. So it's little things like that. And then also just, I started watching Boots and All when I was like 10 or 11 years old. So it wasn't like I knew that I wanted to be a commentator, but I think subconsciously I had like an interest in it. And whether it was going to be a presenter or be an analyst or be a commentator, just probably going to be one of those things that I thought, it'd be cool to be one of those things. But obviously as time went on, it was almost the lead commentator in the game that I would have the most fascination upon. And I'd be like, okay, cool. My dream is actually to one day be a commentator. I don't want to be an analyst. I don't want to be a presenter. I want to be calling the big games live.
No, I can totally get that. You mentioned something that I thought about, the Maurice Joubert at trick against New Zealand and the Richard Bans try. But, if you go on, like on our side in South Africa, like when you still live here, because you're in Ireland now, if you would wake up at 8 o'clock or whenever to watch a Tri Nations match, you would hear, good morning, Nisbo, and then Grant Nisbet would start talking, and just that voice okay, this is a big test match because now it's New Zealand and South Africa, or New Zealand and Australia, and you just knew your excitement just because that certain voice is there, already on that level already. So I can totally relate to you, and I can tell you a little something about myself quickly, and this is going to sound super funny. But I remember I was in primary school, and I was quite a big wrestling fan, SmackDown, Raw, and I always wanted to do the impersonation of Michael Cole and Taz on the commentator's booth.
I'm actually exactly the same. I was a big, WWE, WWF fan back in the day until I got to about 15 years of age. But also the commentary on there,
Yeah.
like obviously very animated and stuff. But a lot of the times when you recall those memories with people, it's actually around the commentary as well. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Take me back.
That resonates with me.
Yeah, I think I actually wrote it in an essay once, what I want to be one day. And I said, no, wrestling commentator. It's a bit embarrassing now, but everyone knows it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this is probably a bit, we probably covered this question, but when exactly did this journey start for you? And for how long have you been doing it for?
So, I continue to almost have that belief of wanting to be a commentator. Well, I've obviously had the belief since, I started watching rugby, but, it took a while to kind of put, a plan in place to start this. And, whenever you try to start something, it's the most difficult part of it is starting. And about 5 years ago, I remember driving to work and Ryan O'Connor was DJing in the morning on KFM, and he was just discussing the Blitzbokkers' victory I think it was in Wellington in New Zealand. I might be mistaken about the venue, but he said, it was so great that they were winning, but, where are our South African voices? And then I was like, oh, yeah, my dream, like my inner voice talking to me, like, what are we going to do about this, Justin?
Yeah.
And then that day I was like, stuff this, I'm going to start. And the first thing I did was I thought, what would be the best thing to do? And I was like, you know what, I'm going to email my favorite commentator at the time and ask him if there's any chance that somebody like me can, get into this business who didn't play the game at a professional level. And I'm just going to email them. So there's the first, brick wall that you got to run through. And for me, that was contacting Sky Sports New Zealand, asking for Tony Johnson's email address. Wow. So I cut the long story short, I eventually got hold of it and I sent an email to him. He replied and he basically said, yeah, look here, the chances are quite remote, but what you've got to do is you've got to start and you've got to call the game behind the television, like you're at the game, and write the players' names down on a piece of paper in this kind of format, like I do. And he said, just give it a shot behind the TV and then you'll know if this might be for you. So I got this piece of advice and I actually let it simmer for a while because I thought, this is going to be ridiculous, doing this behind the television. And then I showed one of my friends and he was like, mate, you've got advice from TJ, like, you got to take this. So then I eventually took it and I was like, okay, cool. This was about probably a month and a half after I got this email from Tony Johnson. And I was like, okay, right, I'm going to take this piece of advice. It's Monday night now. The game is on Saturday. I'm going to do the Hurricanes versus Reds at the Westpac Stadium. From the moment SuperSport tune into the game to the end, and I'm going to prep the entire week for this game as if I'm the actual commentator. And actually, the funny thing was Tony Johnson was commentating on that game. and also another amazing thing was that actually I'm mistaken. It was Grant Nisbet because I can actually remember the try now. So the first try of the game came in the opening 3 or 4 minutes, and it was Wes Hoersen. So obviously, Grant Nisbet said Wes Hoersen, like how he pronounces it.
Oh,
but yeah, just the memory, just the memory from that. So, I would record my voice. I'd watch the game, record my voice into my phone, and the next day, it's probably quite illegal. I'd download the video from the internet, and then I'd do some editing, chuck the commentator's voice up, put my commentary over it. And I'm sure you probably recall back in the day, about 4 years ago, I actually used to post those videos.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I did that for 25 games. And that's, effectively how I started. And I was at the end of those 25 games, so it was after about 8 or 9 months. And in the early part of 2017, I was like, okay, right, got to do something about this. And I got hold of Matt Pierce, and we went for a little lunch, and I just had a discussion with him about commentary. And at the end of our conversation, I gave him a little flash drive, and I said, here's a few tries. Just let me know what you think. And at that lunch, he actually told me about School Sport Live, because they were only just about coming on the scene. They'd been around for about a year or so, but it was nothing big really at that stage in early 2017. They'd be maybe doing one game a week or something like that. And he got back to me about 2 weeks later, and he said, Justin, there's a green light here. They're willing to give you a chance. And in April 2017, so almost 4 years ago, they let me do a few games at the Pole Gym Under 16 Festival. Obviously, it was terrifying, all those doubts. It's like any dream. When you start, you just think, what the hell are you actually doing here? I hated every minute of it actually, because to me, it was like commentating on, well, in my mind at least. Obviously, it wasn't this, but in my mind, I was like, this is like trying to commentate, under 13s playing touch rugby on cement type of thing. That's how like removed I felt. Well, I didn't feel comfortable at all. But it was weird. As soon as that game finished and I was driving back home, I was like, that was actually so cool. So, I was lucky enough because I became, effectively, if I'm allowed to say this, I did kind of become their number one choice as lead commentator. If I was available in the location, they would pick me. So I was lucky they took a liking to me. And until I got to Ireland, I was doing that for the past 4 years. So, the rest was kind of history. Obviously, there's a lot more history to be written, but yes, I've been doing it now. You can kind of call it actually for about 5 years, because I have done some games in lockdown over here in Ireland, and it's almost the 5th anniversary since I started behind my television set when Wes Hoersen scored that try.
Yeah, I've been checking your Instagram, and I've seen you've been doing a bit of a countdown from your first match up until whenever now. And it's actually nice when you can actually look at these clips and see, wow, I actually came this far from number 1 up until number whatever you are at now. So yeah, well done on that. It's super cool, I think, and I hope that you can take it much further. But this is not over yet. I'm talking like the interview's over. So many people think that if you commentate a game, that it's just take the microphone. Okay, it's a mouse. Take the microphone, put some headphones on, and watch your little TV screen, and there's the rugby field, and now the boys are playing. Do your thing. But there's way more complications and work and prep going into it. Would you mind elaborating to the public on what exactly has to be done before a match day even starts for you as a commentator?
Well, I think, the first thing what you've got to get into your mind is that calling any sport or being a commentator on any game is a privilege. And if you do not have that ingrained in yourself, you're not really going to work hard for it. So I developed, a kind of platform or template, so to speak, that I would follow every single week. And it is a lot of work. I mean, if you realize that something is a privilege, you're going to work, hard at it. And if it's a passion, well, you're going to work even harder.
Yeah.
So I developed this kind of template where, I'd be hoping, because the way it worked was on a Monday, I'd probably know on the Saturday what game I'm going to be calling. And on Sunday nights, I'd be guessing what game it might be. So I'd be almost thinking, I hope on Monday when I'm driving home from work, I'm going to see a little WhatsApp message pop up on the side saying, Justin, Bishop Sachs is on at the weekend. Mood lifts. So Monday nights, this is probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock, after the long work day and eating dinner and wife's asleep and whatnot. I'd put this template together, and it'd be four pages. So the first page would be context of the game. Okay, so the importance of the game. It would be their fixtures or their current form. So the games they've played this season, their rankings last year, and then their fixtures to come. Then on the second page, it would be school history and some of the players they have produced. And my goal would be on the Monday night would be to pull that template as far as possible. And it's quite funny because you don't actually use that template that much in the game, but I believe that you need that to understand the importance of the game, because if you don't understand the importance, your viewers aren't going to enjoy it as much.
That's true.
So that would be, Monday night. The third and fourth page are the team sheets. So obviously, it's quite difficult because a lot of the teams only come out on Thursdays or Fridays. So the Tuesday and Wednesday, I would get whatever video content there would be of the two schools. So Tuesday night, let's just say we're doing Bishops versus Sax, and I didn't go to either school. So the Tuesday, I would watch a game that Bishops played if it's available. Sometimes if it's at the beginning of the season, this will entail maybe watching a game from last year, in which case you would only have sight of the grade 11s who are now matrics. Then to get access to the newcomers, the newbies, the grade 11s who are in grade 11 this year, it might be something as ridiculous as going on Facebook and Instagram to try suss out who these guys are, or there might be some video content online. So this is how serious I would take it. Wednesday night I would do Sax, or vice versa, maybe Sax on Tuesday, Wednesday would be Bishops. Thursday, in an ideal situation, and this only really came, I would say in my final, let's call it 6 or 7 months at School Sport Live, where I knew a lot of the coaches. I would sneak out of work. Well, I say sneak out. I would still do all my hours and make sure I'm delivering at work. I would go out to the practices and watch the practices from the sideline. Reason being is, on a video, players can appear quite different as opposed to in the flesh. So for argument's sake, you seeing me on the Zoom call and my hair is, kind of dirty blonde, which it is dirty blonde, but sometimes the color of your hair or even your skin can appear a lot different in the flesh when you get there on the Saturday.
Yeah.
So you think you recognize these players, which most of the time you will be. I'm not saying you have to go to the practices, you don't. But if you want to be extra sure on player identification, because that is the main thing about commentary, is knowing the player who's got the ball and pronouncing their name correctly. That's the number one rule. If you want to be absolutely certain, you want to go to the practice. So that would be Wednesday and Thursday games. Wednesday and Thursday of the week. Friday would be, maybe if you're lucky, maybe calling the coach of both sides. And that you've got to be very careful. I know I've heard a lot of commentators would get access to tactics and that type of thing, but I didn't really ask about tactics or what they're trying to do, because I think you're kind of overstepping the mark there, especially as a lead commentator, because you don't obviously need to understand tactics, but your main thing, it's almost like fact driven, and it's mostly roll calling, who's got the ball, and knowing information about the players. You don't want to really ask the guy about game plan, but the amazing thing is some of the coaches will overshare, but you've got to be very, very careful, because if you let that leak, or for example, some things, especially at the school level, is some things can be very sensitive information, and you got to be very, very careful on the Saturday that you don't overshare. I remember, and I'm not going to give the player's name, but there was one player who I think he did reach 18, and I was actually allowed to share the information because it was actually his choice. Because I think there were some clubs or something in New Zealand trying to get hold of it, well, trying to maybe sign him after school. And he said, "Hey, Justin, can you please mention this?" And he's like, and I'm like, "No, like I need to be careful. Like I don't think that information's in like the public domain."
Yeah.
But actually, you know, legally, I was actually allowed to mention it, but I just stayed away from mentioning that type of thing. And also, at the end of the day, mentioning that type of thing because it's so
sensitive.
you know, it's almost like IP. You're actually trying to you're trying to impress the viewer, and it becomes about yourself. Like I'm saying, me as a commentator, because I'm going to share this like piece of information. Meanwhile, the main thing that you should be focusing on is what's happening in the game. Anyways, so Friday night would be getting my notes together. If I can just actually pull this, I can just show you. It's probably not going to come out clear, but at the end of Friday night, or sometimes if I'm lucky, if I've got the team sheets by Thursday, let me just give a good example here. I would have this entire like template matched out, and then with the players, it won't come across clear on the screen, but I'd have that, and that would just give me peace of mind. And you can never over prepare as a commentator, really, but that would just give me peace of mind that I've done the groundwork. Friday nights, you know, actually during the whole week, I'm buzzing. I can't wait to actually improve my work at work, because I was actually like really efficient, and I wanted to do my work and not waste time, so I could get home and enjoy my evening preparing for the games. But Friday night, I loved Friday night. So if all my prep was kind of done, what I would do is I would have another notebook, and I would just start almost writing my thoughts, almost like a preview of the game. And I would start jotting stuff down about what it means for each team, and then going through each player, and then I'll do it for the other team. And then I would also pick the 15 players who I think are the best out of the 30 players in their positions. And then I would maybe have like, okay, there's 10 from Bishops, 5 from Sacks. You know what? It looks, I know this is always not a fair reflection, because, you know, it's with some of the parts analogy, but I would almost be like, it actually looks like, you know, Bishop should win this game type of thing. But I'd also, you know, the main thing by writing those thoughts would be I'd be putting myself almost in both teams' shoes, and it would improve me as a neutral commentator for the game on Saturday, because I understand where both teams are coming from. And you can, a lot of commentators will say that, you know, they're a spectator on the couch, they're neutral in the commentary box. I don't believe you can be 100% neutral, even if you're commentating, you know, on two countries and you're from South Africa. So if you're commentating on Ireland versus Wales, you're never going to be 100% neutral, never. But by, you know, giving credit where credit is due, you can sound pretty close to neutral, and you should always aim to be neutral. So I found by doing all the work and giving both sides, you know, adequate preparation and doing that Friday night diary kind of entry, I would have understand where both sides are coming from. And a lot of the times, you know, you want a team who's on the verge of maybe breaking a record, and they haven't won a Triple Crown in 8 or 9 years, and they're coming up against a team who's won one game in the season. And you're writing this down, and you like really want this team, like it'll be amazing if they win. But then you start writing a bit of thoughts about the team who's won one game out of 10, and you're like, damn, man, it's actually just important for them. It's just important for their spectators, and it brings both teams up to the level. And I think that's very important on the day of the game. So Saturday morning, wake up, maybe do a little bit of a workout, play some music, favorite songs to amp you up for the game, get in your car, get a few treats, drive out to Pole or wherever it is, and be like, man, this is awesome. I'm going to call a rugby game now. And they could be using anybody else, but they're using me. And it's just, it's amazing.
Now that's interesting you're saying there, because on my side, the preparation for text commentary, it's actually pretty simple. So I would just do the day before. I'll check my team sheets. I'll go through the players. I'll go through the stats of the season, and I'll work from that. But I think it's much simpler on my side as it is on your side, because all those prep that you do it's a lot of work, Justin. I really respect that, man. And you mentioned a couple of other things as well that will be very important in the next question. So you mentioned going to schools and finding out, how these guys look. And it's important for you to know this because you mentioned Sacks and Bishops. Now, commentating Bishops especially, they don't wear jersey numbers on their jerseys, on the backside at least. How do you know exactly, or how hard is it for you to actually call a game, not even knowing that, okay, there's number 9, scrum off this guy? It must be quite difficult for you.
To be honest with you, I think I thrive in that situation because I loved the challenge. I loved commentating on Bishops purely. They play a fantastic brand of rugby, obviously, but I loved the fact that they didn't have numbers. So, I was like, cool, this, by not having numbers, and you need to understand their body language, how they look. You're not just relying on the number, and you should actually apply that to teams with numbers as well, because you should know them that well, because only sometimes the number is going to be facing you. So I remember one practice, I think it was in 2018, and I hadn't done Bishops before, but I had, maybe gone onto Facebook, gone onto Instagram, watched a few games from last year, and I was like, I'm going to go to their practice, and if the coach lets me at the end of the practice, I'm going to try call each player one by one, so 1 to 15.
Smart.
I actually basically got it completely right, but there were 2 players who looked pretty similar, and it was actually quite funny because I still made the mistake when I did commentary on the same team even a month or 2 later, because they looked like pretty much. They'll probably kill me for saying this, because this is the whole joke, is that they always used to tease the 2 players because people used to mix them up. Like, this is even at school, that type of thing. And the funny thing was, I also mixed it up. And then, so it was that like, so just to get back to your question, is that I just enjoyed studying the players so much. And I also saw something the other, I think it was Eddie Jones, who said that coaches shouldn't have to announce their sides. And I was like, that's exciting. And then I saw a lot of commentators on Twitter say, oh, that would be a nightmare, for us commentators. And I was like, no, I would actually love that, because it forces you, and especially at the international level, you have access to so much material. You should know the 30 players in that squad backwards. If you're an international professional commentator, that's your bread and butter. Like, you should be able to, on any given moment, maybe if there's a late change and for whatever reason hasn't been communicated to the match day director, whatever, your eye should be able to tell you, especially at an international level. So I just cut the story, is that I just, really enjoy knowing the body language of the players, exactly what they look like, their hairstyles, like studying them. Because I know on the Saturday, as soon as that player gets the ball, or even as he's not even maybe caught it, I'm already, the words are already coming out my mouth. So the time that he has the ball, bam,
There you go. Awesome, man.
Yeah,
and especially now with COVID-19, changes happen more frequently now, just before kickoff. And you have to prepare for that. You have to make sure that, okay, I think it was recently with Western Province that Frans Malherbe pulled out in the last minute due to illness. It wasn't COVID, but he had flu or something, and just as a precaution, they took him out. And he got replaced by Sazi Sandi, who's basically a Vasika player. He hasn't played any senior rugby before that. So you even have to know the whole squad, not just even the normal match day 30 that you would call, the normal match day 15 or whatever the case may be. So it is quite interesting you mentioned that. What would you say is the most fun or the most exciting part of being a commentator?
I think that the most exciting part of being a commentator, and it can also be also be the most terrifying thing of being a commentator, is that essentially your job is to make the players and the fans at home your sole focus for the next 2 to 3 hours. And it's your job to essentially not irritate them and, keep them. I wouldn't say it's your job to keep them interested in the game, so to speak, because they can always turn your sound down because they don't need you. But just there's a thrill of knowing that you are playing a part in this production of the game to viewers back at home, and it is live, and there is almost a sense of performance. It's not about you as a commentator, but it's about you. It's going to come through in your commentary. So you got to obviously leave your ego at the door. But when you're doing your prep and that entire week, it's almost like you preparing to play. Almost, not almost. It's similar.
Yeah.
In respects, but I always found that I got a thrill out of that, and also just working with a team. You pitch up at the school sport live little truck, and there's your match day directors there, and they're all smiling, and then the cameraman, and then you meet your co-commentator, and everybody just wants to be there. It's once you're part of a live production, it's a special thing because it takes one problem and the thing goes bang. So all the pieces need to fit together, and it's an adrenaline rush, and then on top of it, it's a privilege. So, passion and privilege. That's why it's so special. They could be using anybody else as a commentator, but you've got this role today, and it's awesome.
Definitely, man. Now you make me think of something because when I do the text commentary for Rugby 365, generally, like you just mentioned now, you feel that you are part of the team itself or like a team environment. Like I do it alone. I have my TV screen, my laptop, my phone as just a backup. But when I normally type, I start a match like this generally. So I would say referee, let's say AJ Jacobs blows his whistle and Cohen Bosch gets us underway. But as I type that, I hear it in my head and I can actually hear an exciting voice like, okay, it's kickoff time. And you probably know this by now, but by halftime, you don't have that same sort of energy you had at the start of the match, at least not for me. Because now it's like halftime and the teams they've played a half already. So it's not as exciting as the kickoff, but still, you sort of have that sort of adrenaline rush before kickoff, and you settle into it, as the game progresses. But speaking about the good stuff, what are the challenges for you as a commentator as well?
Obviously, obviously the school level, and I've done a lot of it, is the challenges is obviously getting your hands on information, and being able to get, information sometimes from coaches and, almost developing that network, because at school level, the information is not really in the public domain, especially with like the match day 22 or match day 23 or whatever it is. So, being able to get that information, but I would say that's more like short-term, kind of struggles when you're commentating at the school level. But, going ahead, I would say is, you got to run through quite a lot of brick walls, and you got to get people to take you seriously, to give you a chance, at the television to professional kind of space. So the challenge is, showing other people to an extent that you can do this, and letting them give you a chance. Because a lot of the time, you know, if you're trying to get a television opportunity, they're just going to think that you just woke up one day, you know, with a dream, you know, and they probably get hundreds of requests of people who want to do commentary. So, you know, in my scenario, it'd obviously be a little bit different because, you know, I've actually done games, I've called a whole lot of games, but a lot of the times people also know that you didn't play the game at a top level. You didn't play for the Springboks or whatever it is, but it's getting people to take you seriously and running through brick walls. Okay. So you really need to, you know, you need to fight for getting a chance.
Yeah, but I think the nice part is,
yeah.
No, I want to say the nice part is once you actually are recognized, it's all going smoothly after that, mostly, eh?
Yeah, true. For example, at School Sport Live, you know, I got my chance and I took it very, very seriously. And, you know, I just made a commitment to myself that by the time Saturday morning comes, there will be nobody else on this earth who would have done as much work for me as for this game. So I'd be, at least in my opinion, in my mind, that there's no better person to do this game on the Saturday. So I wouldn't obviously, you know, I wouldn't let that translate into my commentary because then it becomes a whole ego thing. But it's more work ethic. Like I would put in that much work. So, you know, I could prove myself. And I'll do the same again for every single game that I get. So yeah, just back to your question is that I think once you probably break into commentary and even, you know, commentating at the school level, you get challenges because you might not have information or coaches might give you a wrong team sheet or wrong players. They might not update you. And then you put in so much work and then they haven't told you that number 3 is actually number 1 and number 1 scores. And number 3, well, you know, this guy you thought went to Paul Boys and he's now at Bishops, right? But he's playing against his old school and he scores a try, but it was actually number 1 who scored. And then you have this whole little story behind it and it's for the wrong player. So, you know, also challenges putting in so much work and then a mistake happens which is out of your control and it makes you feel like crap, essentially. So that's also another challenge is that you can mess up through, I wouldn't say mess up because you probably wouldn't make that error at a professional level, but you know, it takes one word to ruin something.
Yeah.
So that's also a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, it kind of puts you in a bad light as well because it's not actually your fault if you think about it. If a coach gives you wrong information and maybe swap the props around, whatever the case may be, but you're just doing your job and then afterwards you realize, oh damn, I made a mistake here, but it was out of your control, like you mentioned. So I think that is quite a big challenge actually. But you've commentated a fair bit of games. How many games so far at schoolboy level, by the way?
I think it's around about 100, I would say, maybe 105. It depends. If you include sevens games as well, then it's well over 100.
So you're Centurion by now. So you probably have seen a lot of talent. You have probably seen a lot of talent, but especially recently, which players stood out for you that you think might have a professional career for a long time?
Well, this is not a school player, but I was very excited a few months ago because a year and a half ago, well, it's almost 2 years now in 2021, it was in April 2019 and there was the International Under-20 series down in South Africa, and Argentina and Georgia were taking part. And there was this certain inside center for Argentina by the name of Santiago Chocobares, young face, big body. And and Hollywood, well, he is good, but, you know, call them for 3 games of that series. And I think he already had a professional contract lined up with the Warriors at Super Rugby. And then, you know, he was obviously brilliant. And then in the under-20 series, I mean, in the under-20 World Cup, I think he played at 2 under-20 World Cups. And then actually Tero Abshandadze was also the Georgian fly-off, was also playing at the under-20 series, but he had already played 15 times for Georgia and hadn't lost a test match, but he was playing under-20 rugby as well. But anyways, three months ago, I think it was 3 months ago, I saw the squad getting released for the Tri-Nations.
Yeah.
And Santiago Chocobaras was in the squad. And then he got selected, right?
Yeah.
At inside centre against the All Blacks.
And won the game.
In Australia. and they won the game, but I remember, and I was so excited for the game because, you know, I mustn't talk, you know, I don't want to bring myself too much into this, but obviously I was a spectator, so I could kind of like enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
It was just amazing because a year and a half before that, right, there was such this young face, right, under 20, fresh youngster. And then when they played the anthem, you know, and you know the Argentines get so passionate for their anthems, but then, you know, the camera zoomed in on him and he had his headband strapping, and it looked like this kid was going to war. And I was completely behind him, like a complete, almost like a fanboy. And then he was playing against, I think, like Anton Leonard Brown, Rico Ioane, Jack Goodhue, making his tackles, you know, and they won the game. And he actually didn't play in the second test against New Zealand, but Argentina had never ever beaten New Zealand. He's got 100% record against New Zealand
so far.
And he's, you know, he's drawn so far, and he's drawn against Australia. And I just thought, wow, in the space of a year and a half. But just bringing it down to school level, obviously there's the Cade Volitors, and there's the Fassies and Miller Duplessis, and a few other players as well who have gone on. Henry Jacobs, Ivan Ruiz, Simpido Gomere, Pepsi Buthelezi. There's been quite a lot of them, and geez, you know, there's so much talent. It's just a pity that, you know, there's going to be limited opportunities, because you can't just have, you know, all these players make it. But it's astounding at how much, you know, talent there is, and how almost professional these kids are at that level, and the hits that they take at schoolboy level. I mean, 10 years ago, you know, I kind of wonder, I put myself in this frame of mind before. I didn't play anywhere near first team level, but I was just like, imagine I played like second side in 2008, right? Or I'm saying second side actually now in like 2020, and somebody got injured and I was playing first team in a first team game. I'd be like nowhere near physically ready to these beasts that are now, you know, these schoolboy players who, you know, have a dream of making it professionally, but their training, everything is phenomenal. And the hits that they take, the skill level, it's outstanding.
Yeah, I think of the Bulls prop, Jan Hendrik Wessels. That boy he's massive for his age, man. Like,
I tell you what, here's a story about Jan Hendrik Wessels. Oh my soul. So it was actually a series, the Under-16 Belgium Festival. I think I did 2 games on the first day. The first game was Brian Dampo versus Uppies, and the next game was Grey College versus Belgium. And the coach sent me in the team sheet. Jan Hendrik Wessels was playing at lock that day. I've actually got these notes sitting next to me. And I think at under-16 level, I don't even think he was 16 yet. He was 15. And I think he was about 110 kilograms playing at lock.
He's quite a big lad.
At under-16 levels. And I was just like, oh my goodness. They also had a winger, he actually spent some time in Montpellier, and I think he's back now in South Africa. Marcel Miller, a winger, he's 100 kilograms ready at under 16 level on the wing. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. How do you even defend? I mean, there's some wingers who, you know, at under 16 level, who might be 50 kilograms, right? But the amazing thing is they will still make a tackle on him. So we also got to give the guys who are quite light, they actually do step up. But just on a heavyweight perspective, it's just, you know, under 16 level, you're just like, wow. So now he's playing prop and whatever, but he's going to be, you know, once he does a few more years, he's going to be, if he just keeps it up, he's going to be a whole of a player.
Oh, definitely. I think he's one for the future, for sure. I have to ask you this one, though. It's probably, you're probably going to be a bit of a fanboy in answering this, but who would you like to share a comedy booth with one day? Which one of your idols?
Well, you know, Angus, I've thought about this for quite a long time, and it's actually quite weird because the reality of the situation is I'm a lead commentator, right? So all my so-called role models are lead commentators as well, and for a proper game at a professional level, I wouldn't want to share the commentary box with them, and it is quite sad because we'd be two lead commentators, and you can't have that. So there is one commentator, expert commentator, the co-commentator, and it would be, if I could only do, you know, maybe one more game, and this is my dream game, it would be to commentate with Justin Marshall. And some people, you know, might not like him. I know, especially in New Zealand, he doesn't have his fans, but obviously he has more fans than non-fans, because there's no way in hell that he would be commentating with Grant Nisbet for the past 10 years. But there's just something about him that resonates with me. You can see that he really cares about the game. He's passionate. He's fiery. And yes, he is a Kiwi, but when I've noticed that, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of elements of bias, and he is, you know, deep down wanting New Zealand to, you know, beat another side. But when there's a side like Argentina, and I've got first-hand account evidence of this, when there's been a team like Ireland who's beaten New Zealand for the first time, also when there was a try, when the Lions scored that Sean O'Brien try, when it started off, you know, deep inside their 22, when Liam Williams started with that break, he's had passion in his voice, because he understands what it means. And there's just something about him when him and Grant Nisbet are commentating that I'm just, those two for me, they, you know, any given morning, if they're commentating, I'm so excited the next day to like listen to them. But I would say Justin Marshall, there's one of them. Obviously, you know, I've got many idols: Tony Johnson, Grant Nisbet, Gordon Bray, Hugh Bladen's one of them. A lot of respect for Matt Pearce. There's just even football commentators, there's so many of them. I suppose it's almost, I don't really, you know, if you're a singer, you know, you could maybe share or do a duet with another singer, you know, if you make it. But commentary is one of those things where you can't really, because you've got a specific role and you're going to duplicate that role. So for me to share the commentary box, you know, my idol would have to play the experts, and I don't think they'd be equipped to do that. So for me, if I could pick one commentator to share the comms box with, and I hope someday he might hear this conversation or whatever, is Justin Marshall.
You know, you talk about Justin Marshall now, and I can absolutely totally relate to what you are saying. Remember the 2018 Wellington Test? We beat them unexpectedly. And at the end of the test match, you could hear, he was hurt, but he said, "What an incredible test match." But the way he said it, it's a few simple words, but just the way he said it. And his famous, you can say sayings like, "Mayo moi, yes boy," you know, that's like the raw passion he has for the game. Boomfa, yeah. Like whenever there's a big hit or anything, he's always like, "Yeah, let's get into it, boy."
It's like
Like
It's like
honestly,
Matera,
yeah,
Matera when he saw Matera and he stole that ball. He's like, look at the fire in his eyes. You know, I can't obviously imitate him, but it's just those moments, and I'm just like,
yeah.
Jesus, okay, he's got passion,
He's
and he
one of the
doesn't
best.
overdo it as well. He's serious. He's not
Mm.
pretending. It's because he feels it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think which match was it as well? He just, I don't know, like him and Grant Nisbet together are amazing. And and I probably will get a lot of flack for this now if there's Aussies watching, but if you watch 8:30 in the morning, a Super Rugby match of New Zealand with Grant Nisbet and Justin Marshall, and apart from the quality of the game itself, you go over to Phil Kearns and Rod Cave, you're like, damn it. At least for me, I don't enjoy the Aussie commentary. But I'm not going to ask you to elaborate on that. But just almost, we're going to finish up now because I'm checking the time and, Zoom is a bit of a time limiter. Being based in Ireland now, what is next for Justin Middleton, the commentator?
So for me, obviously, with COVID's put quite a halt on, club games and school games. Yeah, but for me, the next thing is just running through the next brick wall. My goal is obviously to get into whether it's Pro 14 or Rainbow Cup or even women's rugby, whatever it is. I just want to get a gig, and I'm all working to the goal of one day, even if I get halfway, is to be calling a British and Irish Lions test in New Zealand, because
Nice.
it's near on impossible, and hopefully next to Justin Marshall. But yes, so my whole thing is that I want to be an international commentator, and that's what I want to do, and I'm going to run through as many brick walls as I have to. In this industry, it's very easy to get pigeonholed, and I'm trying to get that out. I don't want to be classified as somebody with a South African voice who can only commentate for South Africans. In my opinion, that's nonsense. Because I've commentated for I've commentated on games where the audience speak another language. So for me, or predominantly most of the audience, if you're doing, just say for example, we're doing Pole Boys and we're doing Pole Gym, most of your viewers are going to be Afrikaans. So my point, what I'm trying to make here is that I've never really seen a complaint and I've never been told, maybe there have been complaints, but I've never actually come across one complaint where they've said there has to be an Afrikaans language option on this, or why have you got an English commentator for an Afrikaans game? So the same thing, I know accents and languages are different, but if I was able to do that, right, I think I'm able to commentate in a different country. And some people think it might be your weakness, but I think it can be your greatest strength as well at the same time, because it makes you unique.
No, definitely. I can't see why not, like it's a skill set you have. And if you can apply it in one place, you can apply it at another. So definitely. Well, you basically answered my last question because I wanted to ask you what's your long-term goal in terms of commentary, but you answered that already. So we're going to wrap this up, Justin. It was such an honor and a pleasure to talk to you, my man. And I hope to hear your voice on a Pro 14 match, which I'll
Rainbow Cup.
Yeah, Rainbow Cup, yeah, in the future. So while I'm doing my commentary on my side in the text, you can do yours and I'll listen to yours as well. Because people might not know this, but when you do text commentary, you are very reliant on what the commentator is saying on television, because your eyes can't always be on the screen as well. Because you have to have like a one eye there, one eye here. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, because as you're writing, a player might break, and you might not see it.
Exactly.
So the commentator needs to get the player's name right. Otherwise, you're going to have the wrong player. But you probably would watch the highlights anyway. I mean, straight after the try was scored. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, there has been instances where the commentator got it wrong. I'm not going to mention names, but there's one who's always getting it wrong. And then I look like a fool doing it on my tech side. But if I do have an opportunity, if there's a break in play, I will go back and edit if need be. But mostly it goes smoothly. So yeah, do me that favor in future if you do the Rainbow Cup, and it will help me a lot in my work as well.
I'll tell you what, if that ever happens, it'll be a big moment. I'll be crying that whole week. So, and you'll be one of the first to know.
Definitely, man. Well, thanks a lot. It was good chatting to you, and have a good evening. Cheers.
You too, Angus. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Bye bye.